Hello Fanatics, I am Cindy and welcome to Diamond Painting Fanatics. I am back with my true crime episodes due to popular demand. I have been asked to do some more, so if you enjoy true crime and you enjoy diamond painting, please grab a project, come join me and we will discuss another true crime. Please consider hitting that subscribe button to join me on my true crime journey, and yeah, let's take a look at the project I'm going to be working on today and who we're going to be talking about. What bad person are we going to talk about this week? Stay tuned to find out. On the 24th of February 1986, the body of Sherri Rasmussen was found in the apartment she shared with her husband John in California. She had been beaten and shot 3 times in a struggle. Was this a botched burglary, a jealous husband, or someone else? Let's find out in this week's Thriller Thursday episode. While an undergraduate at the University of California, Los Angeles, from 1978 to 1982, John Rutten, a mechanical engineering major from San Diego, occasionally dated Stephanie Lazarus, political science major. Both were avid athletes. Stephanie played on the UCLA's junior varsity women's basketball team. Stephanie would steal John's clothes when he showered and take photographs of him naked while he slept. Not creepy at all. John never considered the relationship anything more than, quote, necking and fooling around. They had sex for the first time after he graduated. Then he accepted a job and she applied to the city's police academy and became a uniformed officer with the LAPD in 1983. John later met Sherri Rasmussen, a graduate from Loma Linda University who was on a fast-track career in critical care nursing. She entered college at 16 and by her late 20s was the director of nursing at Glenville Adventist Medical Center, giving presentations and teaching classes for fellow nurses. At one point, Stephanie threw John a surprise party on his 25th birthday, unaware that he had been dating other women or that he had developed a serious relationship with Sherri. When she learned he was seriously involved with Sherri, Stephanie was despondent. Quote, "I'm truly in love with John, and the past year has really torn me up," Stephanie wrote to John's mother in August 1985. Quote, "I wish it didn't end the way it did, and I don't think I'll ever understand his decision." In her own journal she wrote, "I really don't feel like working. I found out that John is getting married." Depressed, Stephanie visited John at his condo and the two had sex to give her closure. Because that always works. During their engagement, Stephanie brought her skis to the apartment John shared with Sherri and asked him to wax them. And despite Sherri's objections, he complied. Sherri felt this was a little strange since Stephanie was dressed in flattering workout clothes, and after Stephanie left, his fiancée, Sherri, asked if their relationship was truly over. He did tell her that he slept with her, that he truly loved her and wanted to marry her, and you know, she's out of the system basically, but obviously not because she keeps turning up. John convinced her that the two were just friends. A few days later, Stephanie returned to pick up the wax skis in uniform and armed after he left for work. Sherri was unnerved by these visits and pleaded with John to tell Stephanie to stop coming by. John only said there was nothing to their relationship and that she should ignore Stephanie. According to Nels, this is Sherri's dad, Stephanie later visited Sherri at her office to tell her that things were not over between her and John, and told Sherri, quote, "If I can't have John, no one else will." Sherri confided in her father that Stephanie was stalking her on the street and turning up at her work and all of that. John and Sherri were married in November 1985. On the morning of February 24th, 1986, so they have been married, let's work this out, 4 months. John left the couple's condo on Balboa Boulevard to go to work. Sherri was scheduled to give a motivational speech at work that day, a managerial tactic she did not feel was effective. To avoid it, she told John she's going to call in sick, using a back injury she had incurred while doing aerobics the day before as an excuse. At 9:45 a.m, a neighbour noticed that John's garage door was open with no car visible. Approximately 15 minutes later, John made the first of several unanswered calls home over the course of the day. Sherri's sister also called without answer. At noon, the two men, who the neighbour believed were gardeners in the compound, gave her and her husband a purse that they found turned out to be Sherri's. A maid cleaning a nearby unit said she heard something that sounded like two people fighting and then something falling at around 12:30. When John returned home in the evening, he found his garage door open and broken glass on the driveway. In addition, he discovered that the BMW he bought for Sherri as an engagement gift was missing. Because of Sherri's morning plans, he found it strange that she would have later gone out without letting him know. The house's answering machine had not been activated, despite both of them usually activating it when leaving the house unoccupied. Inside, John found Sherri dead on the living room floor, shot 3 times. There were signs of a struggle, such as a porcelain vase that had apparently been broken over Sherri's head prior to the shooting, a handprint next to the burglar alarm's panic button. It appeared that someone at least attempted to bind Sherri at one point. She had defensive wounds and a bruise on her face that appeared to have been inflicted by the muzzle of a gun. The gun had been fired through a quilted blanket. The investigating criminalist also observed a bite mark on Sherri's arm and took a swab from it. LAPD detectives investigating the case quickly concluded that Sherri had been surprised and killed by a burglar. Sherri's attire, a bathrobe, nightgown and underwear, suggested she was not expecting visitors. Although a maid in a neighbouring unit reported hearing screaming and fighting earlier in the day, she did not recall hearing gunshots. She thought the whole event had been a domestic dispute and did not call the police. It appeared that the perpetrator had been in the process of taking electronic equipment when Sherri came upon them. As a result, jewellery had been left behind and the vehicle taken as a getaway. The abandoned BMW was recovered a week later. It yielded no new evidence. The only thing that appeared to have been taken from the family home was the couple's marriage license. Lead detective Lyle did not consider other possibilities. He quickly ruled out the grieving John as a suspect. John quit his job and moved away from LA shortly after the murder. Nels, who is Sherri's dad, and his wife Loretta, Sherri's mum, told Lyle about Stephanie's harassment, and he made a note of it. John later told the police that he and Sherri never discussed Stephanie. Regardless, the police remained focused on the possibility of a burglary, especially in light of one reported later in the same area, in which one of the two reported suspects had been carrying a gun, possibly a .38 caliber, like the one that had fired the 3 bullets into Sherri, that were later identified by experts as Federal 38J+P. Lyle's partner Steve found the bite mark unusual, as bites during struggles are much more commonly inflicted by women, while the majority of burglars are men. However, because the men have bitten an opponent during fights as well, the burglary theory stood. The suspected burglars, to whom detectives ascribed to the crime, remained at large, despite a follow-up newspaper story 8 months later and a reward being offered by Sherri's family. The LAPD, preoccupied with the violence resulting from gang wars and the crack epidemic plaguing the city at the time, was unable to devote much more attention to the case. Detectives at the Van Nuys office were, the Rasmussens say, often unhelpful when the family called, hanging up or putting them on hold. A year after the murder, the frustrated family reiterated their offer at a press conference and called for more action. Nels wrote to Daryl Gates, then the chief of the LAPD, about the possibility that Stephanie might have been involved. Detectives told him he, quote, watched too much television. That would have annoyed me. He continued to publicise the reward. Nels in particular was unconvinced that Sherri, who had been 6 feet tall and had a large frame and was in good physical shape, had been the victim of a botched burglary. It would have been a struggle for anyone to subdue her in close quarters, and if Lyle had told him at one point that the events may have lasted an hour and a half, a long time for burglars, primarily after items of value in the home. Furthermore, whoever shot his daughter had fired directly into her chest at close range and taken the trouble to muffle the shot with a quilt, suggesting that the killing was deliberate and not an accidental byproduct of a struggle. Lyle eventually retired, and the new detective assigned to the case told Nels that he was unable to follow up on Lyle's notes and did not think any new leads would emerge. Nels rebuffed again in 1993 when he offered to pay for DNA testing on the evidence from the murder, now that technology was available. He was told that the police had to have a suspect in order to proceed with the testing. Stephanie briefly reunited with John in 1989. Lyle's notes show that John had called him and asked him if he was absolutely sure there was no evidence linking Stephanie with his late wife's death. In the meantime, Stephanie continued working with the LAPD. She went on to start her own private investigation firm, Unique Investigations. In 1987, she earned medals, including 1 gold at the World Police and Fire Games in San Diego. In 1993, after stints at the department's Drug Abuse, Resistance, Education and Internal Affairs divisions, she became a detective. 3 years later, she married a fellow officer and adopted a daughter. At work, she became an instructor at the police academy. John eventually remarried as well. He did not pressure the police as his father-in-law had. In the late 1990s, after DNA testing had become more prominent, the LAPD formed a new unit that looked through the forensic evidence collected from the department's cold case files to determine whether any had the potential for new leads through DNA testing. Among the evidence seen as likely to do so was collected from Sherri's residence. However, it was not until 2004 that another criminalist, Jennifer Francis, was able to analyse it. Some of the evidence from Sherri's case, including that which might have contained the suspect's DNA, was missing, having been collected in 1993 by another detective. It's Jennifer Francis. She's now the criminalist. Did not find any matches in the combined DNA index system database, but she did find the saliva in it had come from a female. Undermining the initial detective's burglary theory, several years later, Francis claimed unusually that she had access to not just the sample but the entire case file, which had been given to her to help decide which other samples to analyse. Upon discovering that the biter and likely perpetrator was female, she reviewed it and came across a report of a third-party female who had allegedly harassed the victim at her job and residence before their murder. Francis asked the detective supervising her if this woman had been investigated, to which he supposedly responded with, "Oh, you mean the LAPD detective?" He elaborated that the woman, a former girlfriend of the victim's husband, was in fact a current LAPD detective, but, quote, "she's not part of this." He insisted that the case was simply a burglary and the department had long concluded it. No other detective would pursue the case, and the evidence went back into the files. By 2009, crime in LA had declined enough from its earlier levels that detectives began looking into cold cases to increase their clearance rates. I don't know how to pronounce it. I think I'm pronouncing it right, but if I'm not, just go with me, guys. In Van Nuys, Jim Nuttall and Pete Barber reviewed Sherri's file and found it interesting enough to be worth pursuing. Because the DNA test pointed to a female suspect, they decided the burglary theory was invalid and they would have to start from the beginning. Jim and Pete looked at the case as a murder, with the burglary staged to throw police off the trail. Many aspects of the crime were improbable for a break-in, especially one committed in daylight. Sherri's jewellery box, an inviting target for a burglar, was in plain view atop her dresser that had not been touched. The condo was in the middle of a gated complex surrounded by other units from which burglars could have expected to be easily observed. The front door had an alarm warning that had not been forced open, as it might have been if the burglars had not expected anyone to be home. Inside, a key aspect of the crime scene was also inconsistent with the burglary theory. At the top of the stairs was a stack of stereo equipment atop a VCR. If, as the evidence suggested, the struggle between Sherri and her attacker had begun upstairs and then continued downstairs, that stack would have likely have been knocked downstairs and scattered as well. It made more sense to assume it had been stacked afterwards, when an actual burglar would have fled the scene immediately after the shooting. The forensics reinforced this theory. On a record player atop the stack was a thumb-shaped bloodstain. It had no print, suggesting whoever it was wearing gloves to avoid leaving identification. But the blood was Sherri's, suggesting the equipment had been stacked after the struggle and shooting. It had been left behind. The detectives realised to make the crime look like something other than what it really was. From the 4 bound volumes of case file, they had developed a list of 5 female suspects. Jim was taken aback when John told him over the phone that Stephanie was a police officer. By then, Stephanie had been promoted to a higher level of detective and was working art theft cases as part of the Commercial Crimes Division. As one of the 2 detectives in the nation's only full-time unit devoted to that speciality, Stephanie had gained some local media attention when she and her partner had recovered a statue stolen from Carthay Circle. To better understand the field, she told a local newspaper she had begun learning to paint. Off the job, Stephanie had been active in the Los Angeles Women Police Officers Association and organised childcare for families of officers. She also made chocolate-covered cherries and homemade soup for her neighbours for Christmas. Since Stephanie was still in the department, Jim and Pete, the new detectives on the cold case, realised they would have to proceed carefully. Still, they ranked Stephanie as the least promising of the 5 suspects, since they read in the files that she and John had ended any relationship they had over the summer before the murder. Jim and Pete's investigations soon eliminated all but one of the other women. The other, a former co-worker of Sherri's, who had some disputes with her, was eliminated by covertly collecting a DNA sample. With only Stephanie left, they kept their investigation a closely guarded secret. Not only did her husband also work in the Commercial Crimes Division as a detective, she may have had other friends who could have tipped her off. If she were the killer, she would have improved her defence. If she were not, then they could have unintentionally smeared a fellow officer who had an unblemished service record over the course of her career, with no disciplinary investigations or civil complaints. They only referred to her as Number 5, after hours or behind closed doors, and developed cover stories to explain why they wanted to look at personnel records for one particular officer from 20 years ago. The detectives began looking into other aspects of Stephanie's life during the mid-1980s. Another detective recalled at that time, most LAPD officers had preferred a .38 as their backup or off-duty carry gun. In fact, they were required to only purchase weapons compatible with the Federal Plus P ammunition that had been used in the murder. State and department records showed that Stephanie had indeed owned a Smith & Wesson Model 49. It had been reported stolen to Santa Monica Police, but not to her own department's armourer, 13 days after the murder. Since the location of where Stephanie had reported it stolen was from near a popular pier, they assumed she had thrown the gun into the Pacific Ocean. Without the weapon, DNA would be the only definite way to connect the crime to Stephanie. Jim and Pete theorised from their own experience about how an LAPD officer would commit a murder. It would be better to do it on a day off, and department records showed that Stephanie had indeed been off the day Sherri was killed. An officer would know better than to use his or her duty gun, since it would have to be disposed of after the crime, and the penalties for losing a gun or failing to prevent its theft were severe. Instead, it made sense to use a backup gun like Stephanie's .38. Lastly, a working patrol officer would know how to do it, just enough to make the crime scene look like an interrupted burglary or satisfy an overworked detective. Nels, Sherri's dad, told Jim Nuttall about Stephanie's continued contact with his daughter, which had not been in the files, despite him mentioning it frequently during both the previous detectives' interviews. Realising that Stephanie was now their prime suspect, the detectives informed their superiors and arranged to discreetly collect a voluntarily discarded DNA sample from her, knowing that they could do so without having to get a warrant, which would have let Stephanie know she was under investigation. While off duty, running errands, Stephanie discarded a cup from which she had been drinking, which the other police retrieved. A sample was taken from it, and it matched the DNA from the bite mark on Sherri Rasmussen. I am going to now play you a clip of Rob Bob, the homicide detective supervisor at Van Nuys, began letting his senior officers, all the way up to Chief William Bratton, know of the case, along with his senior prosecutors from the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. It was transferred to the Robbery Homicide Division, which handled many of the department's high-profile cases, including the Art Theft Bureau, where Stephanie herself worked. Her arrest was planned carefully. On the 5th of June 2009, 23 years, 3 months and 12 days after the murder, a detective went up to Stephanie's desk and said, "We need some assistance, and someone has come to us and they have information on this art case, and I believe you're working on it. Would you mind coming to help assist?" And she eagerly agreed, and then they walked down to the jail, taking her away from, because again it's got to be carefully executed. They've walked her down to the jail into a room, and there's 2 detectives sitting there, so she sat where the accused usually sit, and this is what happened.
I don't want to talk about this in the squadron because I don't know who people are listening, and if we go to my side, everybody's always wondering what everybody else is doing. No problem. Okay, but like we're talking about being busy and stuff. We've been assigned a case that we've been looking at. Okay, it's a new case, and reviewing the case, there's some notes to see as far as your name being mentioned.
Okay.
Do you know John Rutten?
John Rutten? John Rutten?
Rutten.
Oh yeah, I went to school with him.
You did?
Yeah.
How long did you know him?
Gosh, I went to school in, went to UCLA in 1978 I started, and, met him at school at the dorms.
Were you guys friends, close friends?
Yeah, we're very close friends.
Yeah?
I mean, what's this all about?
Well, it's a case we're working on. It involves John, and in there, some of the statements we reviewed, there's notes and stuff that he knew you and stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean, we were good friends. I lived in the dorms for 2 years.
You guys lived in the same dorm?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Dijkstra.
Okay. Were you guys just friends or anything else, or?
Yeah, we were good friends.
Yeah. Was there ever any relationship or anything that developed between you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we dated. What's this all about?
Well, it's relating to his wife.
Okay.
Okay. Did you know her?
Not really. I mean, I knew that he got married years ago.
Did you ever meet her?
God, I don't know.
Do you know who she was or anything?
Well, let me think. God, it's been a long time ago. I may have met her.
Yeah. Well, let me see. Let me ask you. You said you dated John. How long did you guys date?
I mean, are you guys? Is this something? I mean, you said I was going to interview somebody about art, and how you guys are.
Stephanie, here's the situation. It's basically we knew that this when we saw this in this chrono that maybe there was some relationship there. That's what the chrono seemed to indicate, and we didn't want to come up to you at your desk and ask those kinds of questions or do anything. You know how up there people can see what's going on if you go into an interview room or people are in there getting supplies.
Okay. I mean,
so we wanted to afford you some privacy, some confidentiality to talk about this because we thought it might be, something, you're married to someone else, obviously, and so forth, and that you may not want to, talk about these things in that setting where someone, we don't want the rumor mill or gossip or any of that kind of stuff to start.
That's fine. I mean,
so we did this just as a means to try and speak to you in just a confidential place where where your business isn't out there for other people and your division to know about.
God, that's been a million years ago. I mean, what year is it now? 2009. I mean, I graduated in 82. 82, yeah. We dated. I dated other guys. I'm sure he dated other girls. I mean, what's this all about? I mean,
well, let me ask you, what ended the relationship between you and John?
It was kind of a weird relationship. I mean, we dated. I can't say that he was my boyfriend. I don't know that he would consider me his girlfriend. We dated. We did things. I played sports in college. He played basketball. His brother played basketball. It just didn't work out. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It was like I went out with other guys, saw other guys. I went on lots of vacations.
Had you ever met his wife?
I may have.
Do you remember her name or anything, or? Or what she did for a living, or where she worked, or anything about her?
Well, I think I'm going to say that I think she was a nurse. And I can't even remember how he said he met her. I mean, it's been so long ago. I don't understand why you're talking about some guy I dated a million years ago.
Well, do you know what happened to his wife?
Yeah, I know she got killed.
What did you hear about that?
I saw a poster at work. I'm sure I spoke to him about it. I think I spoke to another friend of his about it.
And how did you first learn about that?
Jeez. Someone could have called me. I could have heard it at work. I think at one point there may have been a flyer or something. I know a good friend of his...
Were you on the job back then when that happened?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm sure I was on the job. That's why I would have heard about it with the flyer. He had a good friend, Mike Boldrick. Anyways, he may have lived in the dorms. I don't remember if that's how I met him. I may have talked to him. I mean, I don't remember how I heard. I mean, I don't even remember what year it was.
Was everything okay between you guys? I mean, there was never anything uncomfortable or anything between you and her?
I don't know. I mean, it's been so many years. I mean, uncomfortable. I mean, I can't even remember if we had a conversation. I mean, we may have. I may have seen her at his apartment. Geez, how many years ago was that? I don't even know what year she, got killed.
Where was his apartment?
On Roscoe.
Okay.
Yeah, Roscoe and east or west of DeSoto. Either east or west of DeSoto.
Do you know where he moved after? Did he move after he got married, or do you know, or?
I'm sure he did.
Did you know where he was living, or?
Somewhere in the valley.
Did you ever visit him and his wife?
No.
No, never went out to, get-together, dinners, anything of that nature?
No.
After his wife died, did you talk to him again or anything? Yeah,
I mean, I did talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to him, probably his parents, probably some other friends. I'm sure I talked to him.
Yeah.
But you're not sure where he moved to after he got married?
No idea. I mean,
never went over to visit him or
I don't think.
I
don't think so. I mean, I don't know. I don't think I did. I know he lived on Roscoe for a long, long time. I mean, I may know. I mean, he may have told me where they lived, somewhere in the valley. I mean, he may have said I lived over such and such, but I couldn't tell you specifically where.
But you don't remember specifically ever going over to visit him or visit them at wherever he moved when he left Roscoe?
I honestly, I don't know. I don't think so, but
okay.
You know, I don't want to say no. I don't think so. And then he says, "Oh yeah, she came over for something, dropped something off." You know, I don't know.
I mean, when you heard about John's wife being killed, I mean, what was your reaction? I mean, you thought you heard about it, through a friend or in a bulletin or
Either
something?
a friend or a bulletin. I called the family. I called maybe some of his friends that I knew, and I mean, obviously it shocked you if I heard it at work, you know, which I may have. I faintly remember a bulletin going around. Either that or somebody called me. I honestly don't remember.
Right.
And then I probably called his family. I don't know initially. I can't say if I initially spoke to him or not. I honestly don't remember. I may have said to somebody, "Hey, have him call me if he wants to talk," and then he may have done that. You know.
Do you know what the circumstances were regarding her death?
Jeez, let me think back. I don't know if it was, you know, if it was a burglary or something. It's been so many years. I can faintly think that I may have saw a flyer.
Yeah.
May have had her picture on it. You know, that's why I say, if somebody had called me, I may not have known what her last name was. I may have. I mean, maybe if you told me, I would remember it.
Do you remember the first name?
Shelly, Sherri, I don't know, something maybe, you know, like I said, it's been so many years, and, you know, I'm thinking back now, you guys are bringing up all these old memories.
No, it kind of dusts off the cuff.
You know, I mean, geez. I'm thinking that, because, I mean, we would date, he would date other people, I would date other people, and I think, you know, at one point, I mean, he may have been dating her, or I don't know, maybe he was married, I don't even remember. And I'm like, you know what, why are you calling me if you're either dating her or living with her or married to her? Because I honestly don't remember the time frame. And I'm like, oh, come on, knock it off. And now I'm thinking, I may have gone to her and say, hey, you know what, is he dating you? He's bothering me. And so I'm thinking that we had a conversation about that. One or two, maybe. You know, it could have been three. I don't want to say I had 3 conversations with her.
Like at her work or at their house or? No,
I'm thinking that he obviously must have told me where she worked. I'm thinking it was a hospital somewhere in LA, and I could have been. Again, what year was that? Where was I working? You know, I'm trying to think of where. When did you say they got married?
I don't know. I think it was like in 85 or 86 or something like that.
So where was I working?
Yeah, we just kind of picked this up. We don't know a lot about it.
I mean, I could have been working in Hollywood, it sounds like, if that's where I was working. So I could have said, okay, well, you know, and I went and talked to her. And just said, hey, you know what? You know, if he's dating you, he keeps calling me, why don't you tell him to knock it off or whatever? And, you know, because I probably would have told him to knock it off.
You would have told John?
Oh, yeah.
When you said, like, hey, you know, he's calling me, he needs to knock it off or what have you, I mean, was that civil? Was there, I mean...
Oh, yeah, no, there was not. I don't think there was anything. If the conversation lasted a few minutes, I can't even remember. And what is it like, you know, we went out to lunch or anything.
Right, but there was no, like, arguments or fights or it didn't get heated or anything like that?
Not that I recall, no. I mean, I would think that would stand out, I would think. Now, again, that's not standing out in my mind. You know...
So you didn't have any problems with her then?
No.
You didn't have any issues with her?
No, I mean...
But let me ask you. It seems like you didn't have any issue. Now, did she have an issue with you as far as, because now you're telling her, hey, tell them to stop calling. Now, she's like, hey, you figure she'd be threatened by you.
I don't know. I mean,
from what you remember as far as when you talked to her, maybe you didn't take it as serious, but maybe, did she? Maybe she was bugged.
You mean like was she throwing things at me or something? Or,
well, no, just, as far as you're trying to explain, like, hey, have them stop calling me, stop playing games.
I tell you, if the conversation, I couldn't even tell you how long the conversation, if you said, did it last a half an hour? Did it last 3 minutes? Did it last 20 minutes? I can't even remember. It's been so long ago. But again, I mean, what's this got to do with me dating him and, her getting killed? I mean, I don't have anything to do with it. And you got something that's, somebody said, whatever. I mean,
well, like we said, we just literally got this the other day, and you're going through it, and you see
somebody say, "Oh, it's next door."
Right, and so I mean, obviously, it's like we recognize the name, and we know that, you work next door to us, and so we're trying to get some background. We're trying to figure this out. I mean, this is from a long time ago.
Oh, I know,
and things have been kind of slow for us, and so Chief Beck has said, "Hey, I want you guys working. I don't want you just sitting around reading the paper."
Yeah.
So he's kind of pushing some older cases out, even to the guys that work active cases, because and so we see this and we're just like, oh, well, we want to talk to you about it, but of course, the only reason we did it here is because we're getting into some pretty personal stuff in your relationship.
My husband's on the job, and we've been married.
We don't want to take the risk. We don't want to take the risk when one of those interview rooms, even when the door closed, someone's going to get supplies and sees us on a monitor, hears or whatever.
I appreciate it. I mean, I appreciate it. Like I said,
that's where people go when there's orals. When they're doing orals, guys will go in there and try and watch them. What are the answers to the questions?
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So we just want to afford you the most privacy and confidentiality we could.
Let me ask you, did the detectives ever reach out to you?
No one's ever talked to me. I don't think anybody ever talked to me about him.
It seems like back then
I'm thinking that I did talk to a detective. God. Well, what division was it?
In Van Nuys.
And where was I working?
1986?
I would have been working in Devonshire. I'm thinking that I did speak to somebody.
Oh, really? Okay.
I couldn't tell you who it was.
Because it doesn't
he was
say
probably
anything.
On the phone.
Okay.
Would have been somebody...
I don't even know if you said a name, if I would remember it. Because I worked Van Nuys for a while.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I worked...
Detectives Patrol?
No, worked detectives.
Uh-huh.
When did I go to Van Nuys? I worked Devonshire till 88. Then I went to Dare till 92. I worked twice at Van Nuys.
Both as a detective?
Yeah. I don't know. It's like I said, this stuff's been so long ago. I'm sure as soon as I walk out of here, I'll go, oh, shoot, 25 things I'll remember.
But you'll call us, or you'll just come over to our desk and tell us.
I don't know what else you need to know. Like I said, we knew friends together. I don't know what else to tell you.
Well, one of the concerns I had is looking at some of the notes is some of Sherri's friends said that you and her were having a problem because of the John situation.
Well, number one, I don't know who her friends are. Because again, I don't recall if he did tell me where he met her. I don't know even who these friends are. A problem. Like I said, if I spoke to her, I'll go on as far as a limb, and I don't even want to say I spoke to her 5 times because that's probably not even true. I can't even remember.
Well, that's what I'm reading is that you guys had problems with each other and words were being exchanged, and it's all relating to John.
You know what? I can't say.
You can't say?
No, that doesn't even ring a bell.
It seemed like, you would recall something if somebody's going off on you, right?
I would think.
Well, tell me about this car getting broken into.
Well, my car has been broken into several times.
Oh, really? Did you ever lose anything, or?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, let's see. I had a gun that was stolen. I had other stuff that was stolen.
Not your duty gun, was it?
No.
That's good. Has it ever recovered?
I don't know. No, I don't think so. Not that I know of.
Never been notified?
No. Car's been broken into, several times.
Well, like I said, we were looking at the case, and, we had read the notes as far as from Sherri's friend saying you guys had problems or words, and they got heated. And the reason we're asking you is they had mentioned that an incident at her work had occurred, and they've also told us that an incident at her house occurred.
You know what?
And this is at her house during the period of time that they're married.
That's just not sounding familiar at all. I mean, that's just not sound. Again, if someone says that I was at her house and I had an incident with her, that just doesn't sound. Was John there? Did John say this happened? And other people were there. I don't recall. I mean, it just doesn't sound, familiar.
And this is an incident where you showed up. You weren't supposed to show up, and things got heated.
At his house?
Yeah.
That just doesn't sound familiar. I mean, it's not sounding familiar.
So,
not at all.
Now you're saying not familiar because it's just you remember, or it's just...
you know what? I'd have to say I don't remember, because I don't remember. That doesn't sound familiar.
would you remember something like that in your life?
Well, I would think, but...
Sort of drama involving, the other woman type of thing?
Did you ever fight with her?
You mean like we fought?
Yeah. Did you ever duke it out with her?
No, I don't think so. I mean...
You'd remember that, right? That would be pretty...
Yeah, I would think so.
Pretty specific.
Like I said, obviously... it just doesn't sound familiar. I mean, what are they saying? So I fought with her, so now, I'm getting the jump, or the leap. Excuse me, I haven't eaten. They're saying, okay, I fought with her, so I must have killed her. I mean, come on. I mean, that's, I don't even know who these people are. I can't even say I met any of these people. I mean, it's insane. If it happened, I honestly don't remember it. I mean, I don't know what to still tell you.
No, because I'm looking at the notes, and people are kind of, they're pointing the finger at you.
Well, that's not ringing a bell to me, so, I don't know, it's, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, that just sounds crazy to me.
Yeah, so you, offhand, you don't recall ever going into her house and having words and physically,
no,
attacking her attacking you?
No.
Nothing like that?
No, no.
Nothing?
No, not at all.
Okay. Well, on some of the, on this case, this occurred in 86, right? Detectives processed the scene, things of that nature. They did fingerprints and all that stuff. You know the standard stuff. You've been doing this longer than I have.
Well, not about that. I got 26 years on. Going on 26.
19, so. But, as they processed everything, they did the best they could at that time, and they looked at a lot of people and different things in this case. And you're right.
If you guys are claiming that I'm a suspect, then, I got a problem with that.
Okay.
Okay? So, if you're doing this as an interrogation, you're saying, hey, I'm a suspect. Well, now I got a problem with, now you're accusing me of this? Is that what you're saying?
We're trying to figure out what happened, Stephanie.
Well, I'm just saying, do I need to get a lawyer if you're accusing me of this? You
don't have to. You're here of your own free will.
I know, but
you're not under arrest. You can walk out.
You can leave whenever you like.
Well, I'm trying to give you some background of how I knew him, and now you're telling me that somebody's saying that we had this big old fight, and I don't even know what you're talking about. And I don't want to get in trouble for something that I didn't even do, or you're saying I did something.
Okay.
Yeah, we understand.
How would you guys like it if the tables were turned on you?
I understand. No.
Oh, that's what we're telling you. I mean, you're free to go whenever you want. If this makes you uncomfortable and you want to...
Now you're starting to make me uncomfortable.
The thing is, I mean, detectives did what they could at that time on the crime scene. Okay, and the burglary thing you're talking about, that is an angle that they looked at. But now we're looking at everything else on the case. Because nobody was ever arrested on the case.
I don't know that or not.
Okay. Now, what we'd like to do is, obviously you know about all the DNA stuff and things of the nature that, gets done on cases nowadays. If we asked you for a DNA swab, would you be willing to give us one?
Maybe. Because now I'm thinking I probably need to talk to a lawyer.
Okay.
I mean, because I know how this stuff works, okay? Don't get me wrong, you're right, I have been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
And I wish I had been recording this because now it sounds like, there's... you're selling these people say I'm fighting with her, and now it sounds like you're trying to, I've been doing this a long time.
Yeah, we know.
Okay, and now it almost sounds like you're trying to pin something on me. No. Now I got that sense.
Well, what it gets to on these cases, and you know it as well as I do, our job is to identify and eliminate suspects.
I can't believe this.
So if we ask you to the point to give us a DNA sample, a buccal swab, so we can identify or eliminate you, would you be willing to do that?
Maybe. Because I know this,
Well, that's where we're at too. I mean, because right now, from looking at the evidence, it's possible we may have some DNA at the location.
That's great.
And we're going to do what we can to try to put this thing together. And your name's in the book. These people are pointing at you for whatever reason.
I don't know why. That's just crazy. I mean, that's absolutely crazy.
And it would be irresponsible on our part not to look at it.
I know. You guys have to do your job, and I guess I'm going to have to contact somebody. So...
That's fair.
I mean, because I know how this stuff works.
Sure.
I mean, I just can't believe it.
We understand that. I mean, if we were in your position, I mean, we would feel the same way.
I just can't even believe it. I mean, it's just... I'm shocked. I'm really shocked that somebody would be saying that I did this. I mean, we had a fight, and so I went and killed her. I mean, come on.
Well,
that's...
Okay. All right.
Well, thanks for giving me the courtesy. I wish I recorded it.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Stephanie, take care.
All right.
She stood up. She walked out the room, and she was followed by one of the detectives and said, "Stephanie, you're under arrest for Sherri Rasmutin's murder. We have your DNA." She was handcuffed and led back into the room.
This is absolutely crazy.
Have a seat, Stephanie.
This is insane.
Okay. Okay. Stephanie, you know you have the right to remain silent. Do you understand?
Yes.
Anything you say may be used against you in court. Do you understand?
Yes.
You have the right to the presence of an attorney before and during any questioning. Do you understand?
Yes.
If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you free of charge before any questioning if you want. Do you understand?
Yes.
Do you want to talk to us right now?
No.
Okay.
This is crazy. This is I'm like in shock. I'm totally in shock.
On the day of her arrest in June, dozens of police officers arose before dawn. After being briefed on a search warrant they were told would be executed outside the city, but with few details beyond that. They went to wait near Stephanie's home in Simi Valley. Once she had been arrested, the police officer teams in Simi Valley began searching Stephanie's home and car. In her house, they found her journal from the mid-1980s with numerous mentions of her love for John and her despondence over his engagement to Sherri, and no mention of her gun having been stolen. Her computer showed that she had searched the internet for John's name on several occasions during the late 1990s. As the investigating detectives had been, many LAPD officers were stunned at the idea that Stephanie might have murdered someone. Fellow detectives recalled her as vivacious and supportive, a case she had been developing from her art theft work with elder abuse and real estate fraud aspects had to be dropped, since it was highly unlikely that it could be prosecuted successfully if the lead investigator herself was facing a murder charge. After her arrest, Stephanie was allowed to retire early from the LAPD. She was held in the Los Angeles County Jail. A bail hearing was not held for almost 6 months. Judge Robert J. Perry surprised both sides when he set the amount at $10 million in cash, well above what the defense had suggested and more than twice what the prosecutors had proposed. The case against Stephanie was very strong, he said, and therefore she might well be at risk to flee the country or obtain weapons through her husband. Stephanie's lawyer, Mark Overland, said the judge did not understand the case well and contrasted the high figure with a $1 million set for Robert Blake and Phil Spector when they were charged with murder. Several months later, her brother claimed she was not receiving adequate treatment for an unspecified cancer while in custody. Pre-trial defense motions. In October, Overland, her lawyer, moved to have the entire case dismissed on the grounds that the initial investigators should have identified Stephanie as a suspect, but failed to do so. In support, he cited missing aspects of the original file, such as recordings of interviews, Sherri's blood toxicology report, as well as a polygraph test John allegedly failed. The motion noted Nels, her dad, belief that Stephanie was a suspect at the time of the murder and his ensuing efforts to get the LAPD to take that theory seriously. Because of this failure, he argued Stephanie's due process rights had been adversely affected since the quality of evidence had been degraded in the intervening 23 years. Overland argued that the truth in evidence provisions of the California Constitution required that the long delay in bringing charges which adversely affected the quality of evidence which might otherwise have allowed him to make a better case that there were no other suspects, or that the evidence against Stephanie was not as solid as the prosecution claimed, should be considered sufficiently negligent on the state's part to justify dismissing the case. For example, a witness who could have corroborated the prosecution's account of the confrontation between Stephanie and Sherri at the hospital had died in 2000. Prosecutors argued in response that Perry was required to apply federal standards under which a delay could only be considered prejudicial if it was shown to have been intentional. Perry agreed and let the case proceed. Following that denial, her lawyer moved to quash the search warrants that had been executed on Stephanie's home, vehicle and spaces she utilised at work, and suppress the evidence obtained from them. They were, he argued, based on the stale information and did not sufficiently establish the nexus between the places searched and the likelihood of finding evidence there. Stephanie had not moved to her residence, he observed, until 1994, 8 years after the murder, and the affidavit in support of the warrant did not provide any reason why evidence might be found there. At times, the affidavit, her lawyer claimed, was even deceptive, with the submitting detective asserting that the murder weapon might be found there, when Jim Nuttall and Pete Barber had already theorized that Stephanie had reported it stolen 2 weeks after the murder and irretrievably disposed of it. The judge admitted he was, quote, uncomfortable omitting some of the seized evidence, in particular from Stephanie's personal computer and other electronic storage devices at her home, since either she had not had them or they had not existed at the time of Sherri's death. but he felt that since an experienced judge had issued the search warrants on good faith exception to the exclusionary rule applied, and all the evidence obtained could be admitted. Her lawyer's subsequent motion for a Franks hearing, which would have allowed them to cross-examine the detective who had filed the search warrant affidavit to better determine whether the evidence obtained was admissible, was also denied on the same basis. Like, mate, give it up, you know? His next motion was heard in late 2010. He sought to bar the use of statements Stephanie made during her videotaped interrogation at the Parker Center. He argued that, per the Garrity warning, usually given to government employees under investigation, California law compelled her to answer questions as a police officer or face disciplinary action for refusing to cooperate with an investigation, entitling her to automatic immunity for those answers. The prosecution argued that only applied where there was an active administrative proceeding which had not started against Stephanie until after her arrest. The judge agreed with them on the point that her lawyer's argument was overbroad. A year later, the judge denied the last of her lawyer's significant pre-trial motions. The criminalist had used a mini filer, a new product to type Stephanie's DNA, and he argued it was sufficiently different from previous technology that she was entitled to a Frey hearing to determine whether its results were sufficient scientific validity to be admissible. The judge ruled that it was just another form of the PCR method commonly used to test DNA samples. Okay, so he's lost all of those, and now we're on to the trial. The case attracted considerable media attention. Many of its elements, a love triangle with a woman scorned, a cold case unsolved for 23 years, and the accused killer turning out to be a police officer herself, were similar to the plots of popular televised police dramas and reality shows. The trial began in early 2012 in Los Angeles County Superior Court. Prosecutors argued that Stephanie's motive for the murder was jealousy over Sherri's relationship with John. In his opening argument, prosecutor Shannon Presby summed up the case as, quote, "A bite, a bullet, a gun barrel, and a broken heart. That's the evidence that will prove to you that the defendant, Stephanie Lazarus, murdered Sherri Rasmussen." A highlight of the case was John's testimony. Several times he became emotional and wept, particularly when recalling his courtship with Sherri. He allowed that having sex with Stephanie while he was engaged to his future wife was a mistake. In cross-examining the police detectives and other technicians who had originally investigated the killing, Overland, her lawyer, stressed the original botched burglary theory and pointed to evidence such as the similar burglary that happened shortly thereafter that he claimed supported it. He also highlighted evidence that was not analysed, such as a bloody fingerprint on one of the walls, to suggest that the other suspects had not been adequately excluded from consideration. He questioned whether it could be truly inferred from the weapon used that it was Stephanie's lost gun, as 38s were in wide use. Since the DNA from the bite mark was central to the prosecution case, he attacked it vigorously, pointing to improper storage procedures. During the 2 days in which he presented his case in chief, Overland focused on the prosecution's theme of lovelorn Stephanie, presenting friends of hers who denied that she was showing any signs of violence or despondence over her failed relationship with John at the time of the murder. Excerpts from a contemporaneous journal were offered as evidence. She wrote of dating several different men, none of them John. He reinforced his attack on the forensic evidence, calling as his last witness a fingerprint expert who said that some of the prints at the crime scene did not match those of Stephanie. The prosecution and defence reiterated their themes in closing arguments. After showing the jury of 8 women and 4 men photographs of a beaten, bloodied Sherri, prosecutor Neil Nunez told them, quote, "It wasn't a fair fight. This was prey caught in a cage with a predator." Overland dismissed the entire case on circumstantial fluff and fill, and he was attacking the bite mark DNA sample. He moved for a mistrial after Nunez, Sherri's defence, if you like, reminded the jurors that no alibi had been provided for at the time of the murder, since the defendant's refusal to testify cannot be held against them. But the judge denied it, saying that he did not take that as directly suggesting Stephanie herself had refused to testify, and therefore her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination had not been violated. In March, after several days of deliberations, Stephanie, by this time is 52, was convicted of first-degree murder. Later that month, she was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison and is currently serving her sentence at the California Institution for Women in Corona. After credit for time served before the trial, she will be eligible for parole in 2034. And that concludes the very tragic end to Sherri Rasmussen, her life. 3-4 months of marriage, and I did read somewhere that in the trial, John felt incredibly guilty because she died because she married him. And I thought, oh, that's just broke me. He felt really, really bad, and effectively, you know, when you boil it down, it wasn't his fault, it's completely Stephanie, but that's how her life ended. What annoys me the most is everyone from the family, and I know the family are looking for answers and you have to go where the evidence takes you, but even Jennifer Francis, she was saying, why don't you look at Stephanie, because, you know, the DNA is looking that way, and it took 23 years to finally get justice. But thank you for staying with me. It's well over an hour today, and yeah, let me know your thoughts down below. I shall see you next week for another episode in our Thriller Thursday playlist. Thank you. I hope you have a lot of your project completed, and I shall see you next week. Love, hugs, sparkles, and stay safe out there. Bye.